Hi, welcome to the channel. Today let's have a look Nordstrom's article. This research article explores the professional identity and unique challenges faced by educators in community language schools, specifically through a case study of a Swedish teacher in Australia. The author highlights how these teachers must navigate conflicting language ideologies and diverse student proficiencies while operating in marginalized educational spaces with limited resources. Key findings suggest that a lack of legitimacy and institutional support often leads to teacher burnout and high attrition rates. The source emphasized that while these schools are vital for heritage language maintenance, teachers struggle to reconcile their professional pride with the symbolic power held by parent-led communities. Ultimately, the text calls for better pedagogical training and recognition to help these invisible educators manage the complex intersection of culture, power, and instruction.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The title of this story is Teaching on the Edge, and it's all about why a really passionate teacher just walked away. Now, this is a very personal story, but it also pulls back the curtain on this hidden world of education, one that's happening right on the fringes. And it asks a really tough question. What happens when a teacher's professional pride is pushed to its absolute limit? So, get this. This quote, it's a field note, taken from a 5-month study, and it captures the exact moment. The teacher, we'll call her Britta, has been at this school for 6 years. And then, one morning, just like that, on her drive to school, she decides she's done. It's a moment of pure crisis, right there in her car.
And that, of course, leads us to the big question, right? Why? I mean, what could possibly push a dedicated, experienced teacher to just suddenly quit? To figure that out, we've got to step inside the very unique world she was a part of.
So, Britta's story unfolds in what a lot of people just call Saturday school. But it's actually part of a much bigger system of community language schools. And let me tell you, it's a world away from the kind of mainstream schools that most of us are familiar with.
So what are they? Well, these schools are totally grassroots. I mean, they're set up by immigrant communities who want to pass on their language and culture to the younger generations. It's all about keeping that heritage alive. The whole thing is really driven by this incredible passion. And you might think, oh, that sounds kind of small, maybe a niche thing, but no way. In Australia alone, we're talking about over 100,000 students. That's huge. These schools are a really significant part of the education landscape, even if they often fly completely under the radar.
But here's the reality check. Teaching in these schools is tough. They're usually running on weekends, often in borrowed spaces like a church basement or an empty mainstream school, and they often don't have access to basic stuff you'd take for granted, like reliable internet or even a proper whiteboard. The study actually points out that this makes teachers feel like unwelcome guests or invisible adjuncts, like they're just on the outside looking in.
Okay, so now that we have that backdrop, this challenging kind of peripheral environment, let's dive into the specific struggles Britta was dealing with. Turns out she was fighting 3 major unseen battles that all led to that moment in the car.
All right, battle number 1, and this one might surprise you. It starts right there, in our own classroom. And it wasn't about kids acting out or anything like that. It was about the fundamental, almost impossible challenge of the student mix itself.
Just try to picture this classroom. It was a total mix of contradictions. You've got students who are practically fluent sitting right next to total beginners. You've got a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old in the same class. That's a huge developmental gap. But the biggest problem was this. You have these sharp, smart teenagers whose mental level is way up here, but their Swedish language skills are way down here. How do you teach that? It's basically an unmanageable situation for any teacher.
And this quote from Britta, wow, it just says it all, doesn't it? I don't go home satisfied every Saturday. For any teacher who really cares, that is the deepest cut. It's that constant feeling of not quite succeeding, of knowing you just can't give every student what they need. And this wasn't just a one-off bad day. This was every single Saturday.
So, that was battle number 1. Battle number 2 was a little different. This one wasn't fought in the classroom, it was fought inside Britta's own mind. It was a real crisis of confidence, and it all came down to her qualifications.
Listen to this. She says, "Sometimes I don't believe in myself because I'm not a Swedish language teacher." Now here's the thing you need to know. Britta was a fully qualified high school teacher. I'm talking an expert in math and chemistry. But in this specific context, teaching Swedish, she felt like a total fraud. When kids asked her tricky grammar questions she couldn't answer on the spot, she'd have to go home and study, all on her own unpaid time.
And that brings us to the third and final battle. This one was all about power and professional respect. It was her fight just to be seen as the expert in the room. See, the school was run by a committee, and it was mostly parents. And look, Britta wasn't against their input, but she felt like they held all this symbolic power over her actual teaching. Her professional judgment was getting questioned all the time. She even said she felt more under surveillance there than in any normal school. She just didn't have the autonomy a professional needs to do their job.
So you've got these three battles raging all at once: the impossible classroom, her own self-doubt, and the difficult power structure. It wasn't just about having a hard job. All of this came together and created something much deeper: a full-blown professional identity crisis.
And this chart just lays it out so clearly. Think about it. In her mainstream school job, her identity was solid. She was the pedagogical expert. She was respected, autonomous, a legitimate professional. But then, at the community school, her professionalism was questioned, she was under surveillance, she was undermined by the committee, and felt totally marginalized. It was like a direct attack on who she was as a teacher. And then we get to this quote, and this is it. This is the heart of the whole story. She said, "The professional pride takes a beating when it isn't achievable." That's everything, right there. The core of who she was as a teacher, her professional pride, was just getting hammered week after week. And when the job itself feels impossible, that pride just can't take it anymore. Now, Britta's story is obviously powerful on its own, but it's about so much more than just one person. It's really a window into a much bigger issue: how we support, or more often, how we fail to support, the teachers who are doing this kind of critical work. I mean, what happened to Britta is a textbook case of burnout. The research is crystal clear on this. When teachers don't have support, when they feel undervalued, when their professional autonomy gets chipped away, they leave. It's that simple. And her story really shows us that while these community schools are so important, the teachers in them desperately need more support and the right kind of training to actually succeed in that unique environment. And so that leaves us with one last really important question to think about. We're talking about teachers who are doing this quiet, often totally invisible work of keeping languages and cultures alive for future generations. So maybe the real question isn't just, why did Britta quit? Maybe the real question is, how can we better support all these invisible teachers so the next one doesn't have to make that same heartbreaking choice?